Chapter 12. Follow the Drinking Gourd. June 1856. So it's starting up again, James thought. Pa was off defending the man they said was a slave stealer. Ma was hiding runaways, and he and Rebecca were expected to keep their mouths shut. The unfairness of it all hit him like the snap of a wet sheet when he came home from his new room and found the girl peeling potatoes as if she'd always been there. Ma stoked the coal stove and greeted him without turning around. "Welcome to a new summer day, James." Shake hands with Miss Lisbeth Charles. James wiped the morning sweat off his hand and stuck it out. The girl Lisbeth wiped potato starch down her apron and shook his hand. "Morning, Mr. James Weaver. You don't look a bit like your sister." She looked him right in the eye, not like the others who'd come to the house. Something was wrong here. Miss Lisbeth was no ordinary runaway slave. As soon as he saw his ma's face, working her lips like dough, eyelids shading frightened eyes, he wondered what hold this young Negro had over his mother. And at the same time, he just knew Ma had given her leave to stay with them. She wouldn't be moving on by nightfall like the others. Miss Lisbeth must have understood some of the dread in his face. "Your family is kind to let me stay a spell," she said haughtily, as if she had it coming. There wasn't a hint of a smile in her voice, and her speech was so school-teacher-like, not like the other runaways who'd picked up words hurdy-gurdy. "Ma couldn't get the stove lit." "Well, it's too hot to cook anyway," she said. "We've got some cold meat pie from last night and peaches and a bit of bread pudding I put by. We'll make do. Ma, I'm going down to the river with Jeremy and them. Too hot to do much but swim and fish on a day like this. Yes, bring us home a catfish or two for supper. We'll cook the fish outside on an open fire." That brought the first smile to Miss Lisbeth. "Oh, I do love fried fish with that smoky fire taste." "Fine," Ma said nervously. "Lisbeth, would thee go down to the cellar and fetch the meat pie and a handful of peaches, please?" They'd built steps to the cellar inside the house, a modern innovation, and Ma pointed the way. When Miss Lisbeth was out of earshot, Ma whispered, "I'm called to this, James. She's asked me to teach her to read and write." "Ma, thee knows it's illegal to teach slaves to read." "Lisbeth is not a slave. She's a free Negro in free soil. It's starting up again. Ma, Rebecca and me wondering who we're going to find warming their feet by our fire." Ma had beads of sweat on her upper lip. It would be months before anyone would need to warm his feet. Why had he used that ridiculous example? But now he hit her with the big one, and us lying to Pa. Ma's nose flared, which was a sure sign she was trying to get herself easy again, so she wouldn't say something she'd be sorry about. "Thee must understand, James. Each of us must answer to the voice within." But we were just getting happy out here in Kansas, just starting to feel like maybe it could be home. Building the house a second time had done it for James. He'd sketched every step of the process. Only yesterday he'd ripped up his baby sketch of the Boston house. He'd thrown the paper pieces into the Wakarusa, watching them bloat up and sink. "James Weaver, I have been waiting for a sign. Lisbeth is the sign. Thee must learn to accept what God demands of us. Of thee, Ma, not of me." Ma reached out and gently raked his hair across his brow. "I must take a pair of shears to thy hair, or thee won't be able to see thy supper." He jerked away from her touch. "Jeremy and them go to a barber. And will thee be having some tailor sew thy clothes? And will thee be taking thy meals at a boarding house?" Ma asked crossly. "Who is more important to thee, some slave girl or thy family?" There it was out. Ma locked her arms across her chest, and James knew she was deep in prayer. Her chest rose and fell as if she were sleeping. Her nose flared. He tried to pray, but only felt the silence that echoed in the new wood-paneled room. Finally, he heard Miss Lisbeth's footsteps coming up from the cellar. "She stays," Ma whispered. The catfish was crisp and salty, and the potatoes, too, fried in a big pan over the campfire. A pile of fish heads and bones lay on the ground, and Rebecca poked at the eyes with a twig. "Thee can pop them out for marbles," she said gleefully. The Kansas evening was steamy already. They had no need for more heat, so Miss Lisbeth doused the fire with a slug of water from a bucket. While the fire sizzled, James stole a look at her face, grayed by the dusk and the slant of moonlight. Ma caught him looking. Lisbeth tells glorious stories. Tell us one, Rebecca begged. She didn't need much prompting. There's a man named Henry Brown, she began. Was he a white man? Rebecca asked. He was a black man. Could have been my uncle. A man who worked in a tobacco factory in Virginia. A slave man. Amen. The cadence of her speech was so musical that James was lured into the story. A braver man you can't imagine. A man who dreamed of making free. So deep and wide was his yearning for freedom. He did something that could have delivered him to lonely death. What did he do? Rebecca whispered. Henry Brown of Virginia. He heard the voice of God, said, "Go get a box and put yourself in it." Had himself scaled in a box shaped like a coffin. Oh, he couldn't. Could and did, Rebecca Weaver. A God-sent white man, a carpenter like the other one, made him a box, nailed it shut, put 5 hickory loops wound round to keep the box fixed, mailed him to Philadelphia. Amen. How long did he stay in the mail? Rebecca asked, and Ma said, "Hush, child. No, let her ask questions. It's only when folks stop asking questions we're in muddy waters." No? A Negro had out and out said no to a white woman? James watched her more closely, drawn deeper into the rolling river of her voice. 26 hours he traveled in that box, tossed upside down. He was blood pumping into his head from Virginia to Maryland. James wondered about the details, food, water, and so forth. But what happened when he had to make water? Rebecca Weaver. Don't know, Miss Lisbeth said with a smile. You go up to Philadelphia sometime. Ask to see a man called Henry Box Brown. Little man, not much bigger than me, and you ask him, what did you do 26 hours in that box when you had to make water? Oh, Miss Lisbeth, I couldn't. Then listen. When that box, it got to Philadelphia, 3 men were waiting for him. First man knocked on the box. He thought he heard a tapping, but couldn't be sure. Second man rapped on the box with a hammer, and there wasn't a sound from inside. The third man, his heart beating fast, he didn't wait for an answering rap. He took his bowie knife, and he cut the hickory loops that held the box fixed. Those men, they pried the lid up. Long nails came squeaking up through the wood, pulled away the straw and cotton wool padding that kept Henry Brown from breaking his bones when the box was tossed from the train to the riverboat. And what do you reckon they found? James guessed. His hair turned white and he was crazy as a loon. Nah, those 3 men, they fell back when Henry Box Brown stepped out of the crate, and he said to them, "How do you do, gentlemen?" Spry is a young buck, drenched in sweat, though. True story, amen. James was fixing the details in his mind to tell Jeremy and Will, only he wouldn't be able to tell them where he got the story, and they'd never believe it. Miss Lisbeth said, "Black folks find all different ways of following the drinking cord." James had heard a song with those words. Some of the men were singing it at the warming for a family whose house had just been rebuilt. Following the drinking gourd, he thought it was a bawdy song. Not a drinking gourd for spirits, surely, Ma said, her voice girlish. No, ma'am. Look up, see the sky. See how those stars make a dipper. They all had their faces toward the darkening sky. I don't see it, Rebecca said. Thee must draw a line in the mind from star to star, child, and see if it doesn't look like a big water dipper. Miss Lisbeth added, now look for the brightest star at the handle end. See? James saw it, the North Star. Last spring he'd been amazed to find it in the sky here, just as it had been in Boston. Mr. James Weaver sees it. It's the North Star. When my brothers and sisters leave their shackles behind, we follow the North Star. Keep seeing the star, you know you're heading north to freedom. And while we're still down there, only just dreaming about making free, we look up at that star like we're doing tonight, the water dipper too, and we sing so our masters don't know about the dream that's burning in our hearts. Sing steal away home to Jesus. Sing wade in the water, children. Sing follow the drinking gourd. Miss Lisbeth chuckled. White masters think we haven't got a thought in our heads. Thee tells it right pretty. James said, gazing at the stars that came as tiny explosions in the blackening